Good morning, everyone. So happy to have you with us today. We have quite a turnout this morning. My name is Tammy Pentabona, and with me I have Nicole Mullen and Marcy Elmore. Nicole will be giving a quick demo of the ACE cargo release before handing it off to Marcy, who will walk you through the FDA screens. This webinar will be recorded for future use, and we also have attached many of the FDA manuals that will help walk you through the screens. These manuals can be found under the handout section. They are attached. The only one that's not attached is the food or BTA. We will be emailing those to the users probably later in the week. Today, for the purpose of the webinar, we will be using version 1601, which is not yet in production. This version looks and feels just like the current version that you are using today, but contains a lot more validations inside of the PGA screens. These validations will eliminate rejects by making sure that users are entering correctly formatted data. Marcy will talk more about this later on. During the webinar, please submit any questions you may have through the electronic question section, and we should have time at the end for a Q&A session. If for some reason we do not get to all of the questions today, we will be creating and sending out an FAQ document that will list all of the questions submitted today along with the answers. Before we start, I would like to send out a quick poll just to find out how many of today's users have processed ACE cargo release entries or have submitted at least one or more. So if we could send that poll out, we'll give you just a few seconds just to answer it. We just want to get an idea before Nicole starts. Okay, so it looks like, that's fantastic. So it looks like more than half, 3/4 of the users today have processed at least one. We do have a percentage that have processed no ACE cargo release. So hopefully after today's demonstration, you will be able to start. The goal is to get everybody on ACE cargo release by the mandatory, way before the mandatory date of February 28th. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Nicole, who will walk you through the ACE cargo release. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Tabby mentioned, I just wanted to go ahead and take this time to briefly show you guys the difference between a CRL transaction type marked as ACE and a transaction type as an ACRL. You guys should be able to see on the screen right now, I have a CRL transaction type up. Everyone should be familiar with this first screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and mention here, you'll see in the trans type it is a CRL. I'm going to go ahead and batch the entry. And the first thing that I wanted to mention is you'll see up here in the upper portion of the screen, there's now an ACE box. So you can check that box or uncheck that box according to if you want to transmit a CRL and send the entry summary through ACE, you would go ahead and check the box. If you want to do your normal CRL, then obviously you wouldn't have this box checked. But again, this is just to transmit your entry summary via ACE. Your customs release would still be transmitted through ACS. So that's the main difference right here. In addition, I wanted to go into the line, and I wanted to let everybody know that the consignee and manufacturer, they are required on the line level. So I just wanted to let everybody see that up here in the upper right-hand corner, this is where you're going to go ahead and put those entities in. Since it is required on the line, I didn't want anybody to get nervous and think that if you had a lengthy entry that you would have to do this over and over again repeatedly. There is a shortcut that I wanted to show and share with everyone. If from your release entry editor screen, you go to your defaults menu and select entry defaults, here you'll notice that you could have a manufacturer ID as well as an ultimate consignee number, and then those will go ahead and default on every single one of your lines. So I just want to go ahead and display something else. We should all be pretty familiar with this portion. I went ahead and selected a tariff that is for seed potatoes. I wanted to choose something that would flag for multiple things. Since we're doing a CRL, you'll notice that this OGA tab is highlighted, and if you scroll down through the little grid below it, it'll tell you in detail what is required or what is not required. This one says that APHIS data is required, and it also states that FDA prior notice data may be required, so it's an FD3. So basically, for this one, I went ahead and I disclaimed FDA like normal. The main thing I wanted to point out on this one is, again, since we're doing a CRL transaction type, the PGA tab is not highlighted. So because we're doing a CRL, I've gone ahead and disclaimed the FDA, the APHIS data that is required. You would just follow your normal procedures right now because as, again, a CRL, there's no electronic data that can be transmitted when doing a CRL transaction. So with that being said, you would go ahead and just manually submit any paperwork regarding the APHIS portion. And that, in a nutshell, is the CRL. Everyone's pretty used to doing those. The main thing that I wanted to show then is the difference between the CRL to the ACRL. So I'm going to go ahead and open up an ACRL transaction type. First and foremost from this screen, it still remains the same, but I did again want to make sure everyone at this point should be turned on for ACE transmissions. So if anybody is worried how to select a transaction type for an ACRL, it's just going to be added right here to the bottom of your transaction type drop-down menu. You can find that right there. So I've made this an ACRL entry. I'm going to go ahead and badge the entry once again. First thing I wanted to point out is your ACE box is grayed out and disabled. When you are transmitting an ACRL transaction type, you're going to be sending both the release and the entry summary through the ACE system. The other thing that I wanted to point out for anyone who's familiar with or unfamiliar with an ACRL transaction is the entity's ACE cargo release portion right here. These are 4 mandatory fields. When you hit the Add button, a screen will pop up for you to go ahead and select these 4 mandatory fields. And the nice thing about the ACRL is instead of having to go to your entry default or automatically select the company or manufacturer on the line, if I scroll down here and I go ahead and hit Add, you'll notice the manufacturer and the company automatically populates over into your line item entities portion of on the line level. So that's nice. And once again, I've added a line here for seed potatoes. And with that being said, I wanted to make sure to show the difference between an ACRL. You'll notice that now the PGA tab is highlighted. We still have the same things required, APHIS and FDA, but now you'll notice this starred portion make it very clear that since you're doing an ACRL, this is going to be an electronic type of filing. So just to show you a little bit of the PGA screen, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. For instance, before February 28th, you are allowed to do an ACRL with an FDA disclaim. As of February 28th, you'll obviously be able to go ahead and do live transmissions of FDA, any real type of information. But for the meantime, if anybody has any questions, I wanted to show you how to file an FDA disclaim in an ACRL. You hit the Add button. It will bring up this PGA agency screen. From there, you can go ahead and select your agency as FDA. Your program would also be FDA. And I'm gonna show it to you new really quick. So we have FDA, your program, FDA, and you'll notice how it says disclaim only. The other ones here are for as of February 28th when you want to pick your program. But for right now, you are allowed to do an FDA disclaim only, so we would select that. There's no processing code required, but you'll notice that this little disclaimer box pops up, and then you just pick the appropriate disclaimer, either code A or code B. So I'll back out of there. If for whatever reason you transmitted an FDA disclaim in error, you would just highlight the PGA product that you have listed from this grid. You could have multiple ones. For example, the potatoes, they flag for APHIS. So if we wanted to add another agency, same thing. You go ahead and hit add, select the appropriate agency, pick the correct program, so on and so forth. If for whatever reason, like I said, you needed to delete one, you would just make sure that your product is highlighted in blue and then you delete to remove it. Also with APHIS, since that is not live as of yet, if this were to, you're doing an entry and it says it is required, the nice thing about ACRL is instead of filing your paperwork manually to CBP, we actually now have the use of the DIS module. So I'd like to go ahead and show everybody that real quick. The DIS module, again, everyone should be turned on for that, but if you are not, please let us know right away. We'll work with you to get you set up for it. You'll notice it's right here under the other module that says ACIS. I'm going to go through this with you live. So this blank screen will come up. First thing you want to do is go ahead and hit File, New. You'll notice again, everything that's mandatory is in yellow. So for this particular situation, I go ahead and hit on message type, and we have document submission or message validation response from CBP. I'm going to go ahead and pretend that this was for my APHIS entry, so I'm going to do document submission, hit select. You'll notice your action code is already filled in for you to add, because that's exactly what we're doing. It's a new DIS, and we are adding something. You do have the option, though, to delete and replace accordingly. The next thing to keep in mind is from this screen, I know it doesn't really reflect that a document is required at this level, but this is where you would like to attach your document. So right here at the bottom, you go ahead and hit Add. It'll pop up the Add Edit Document Image screen. Again, everything that's mandatory is in yellow. So the document label, I'm again going to pretend that this is APHIS. And I have my APHIS supporting docs. You'll notice this list is incredibly long. So the options are all available to you for whatever type of documentation you might be submitting. But for this purpose, I'm going to go ahead and select supporting docs, and it's right there. Now it says no file data attached. So I haven't yet selected my document. So I'm going to click on the ellipsis. And I'm going to find my document.
You can just go to the desktop and pick any document.
So for this instance, we'll just select something. I've gone ahead and hit OK. And now that message pops away. So I now have my document selected. And the last part of this piece of information that you'll need to do is under the government agency section, this whole block is yellow. You'll need to select the agency that you want to send your actual documentation to. So again, if you hit the ellipsis, a long list of PGAs will be available to you. You'll notice at the top there is all. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but it is an option. And again, for this purpose, I have APHIS, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then in order to make it actually send to that agency, you'll want to go ahead and hit Add and make sure that your agency drops on down to this lower box. Just to show you that you can send to multiple people, I'm going to go ahead and select CBP as well. Hit Add, and now these are the two agencies that would receive this documentation. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. My document has now been added. And there's a manual for this as well, I'm sorry, but within the test environment, it looks like I got booted out of that. So we do have a manual. If anybody has any questions, though, please let me know, and we can go over it. It is very self-explanatory, though. And again, so that was the breakdown. If you have something that's in an ACRL, you can go ahead and use the DIS module to electronically submit your paperwork. Last but not least, for me, I do have some things just to keep in mind. So simply stated, ACRL trans types, you should be using the use of the PGA tab, and ACRL trans types, you should be using the OGA tab until February 28th. At which time the OGAs will be completely moved over to PGA. At this time, all entry types, except for entries that start with A3, can and should be processed as an ACRL. This means entries without OGA or entries that are only an FDA disclaim or NHTSA should be transmitted as ACRL at this time. All of the manuals will be provided to you for all active PGAs. If you have any questions, please revert back to those first prior to sending in a help ticket. They will walk you through the PGA process step by step. There is a search environment available to those who are interested in testing the software for the PGA, so if you are interested, please let us know. SmartBorder does have the ability to copy any products from a client's product library that have OGA information and pull the majority of the relevant information into a PGA record. Tammy has some additional information regarding this, and she'll be sharing it after the webinar. There are some fields that would still require you to manually fill them in, and this would depend on the PGA that applies to the product. Also, we are working with having an ABI message that will populate into your entry when you have used the DIS module and your submission has gotten the received with no error messages from TBP, but that is something that's coming soon. And the last thing that I wanted to go over is the new ACRL ABI messages that you can receive. SO messages are the replacement to the RR message, which is the customs release message. This can be seen when viewing your ABI messages in an entry. Also, you will now receive a 1USG message, which will replace the FDA may proceed when transmitting PGAs. The 1USG message will be found in the body of your SO message. And if you did not receive a 1USG, not all releases from the many possible applicable PGAs associated with your entry have been provided. I do have a screenshot to go ahead and show you what was just discussed. Again, here's going to be your new SO message and your ACECRL release status notification. You'll see within the body, like we wanted to go ahead and share, this has been released, but in the body is where you're going to find your 1USG at the bottom. And as for my portion of the day, I am all set. I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Marcy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcy Elmore. I'm a business analyst here at SmartBorder, and I've been involved in the PGA FDA project for quite some time. And it's very exciting right now that we're finally in the home stretch. I'll be going over the SmartBorder user interface and giving an overview of the few different FDA programs and how the software will be used to transmit PGA information. As a reminder, this is an overview of the software. I encourage you to learn all you can about any new FDA requirements that may come hand in hand with the switch from OGA reporting to PGA reporting. There are FDA and ACE webinars scheduled for this week, and links for those can be found on the SmartBorder homepage. CSMS messages are coming out at a rapid rate right now. Pay close attention to them. Be sure to sign up for any informational sessions that may come out. The more informed you are, the smoother the transition you will have. As we move through my presentation, please feel free to submit any questions you may have regarding the software user interface for the FDA programs. We'll get to as many of them as we can. As a reminder, this session is for the overview of the software and is not intended to address specific FDA requirements. Those questions should be fielded to your FDA team or ABI rep. The go-live date for FDA reporting through ACE PGA is February 28th. And with that, I'm going to start to show you the user interface. Bear with me one moment while I get my entry up here. Okay, we're going to start out looking at what the new PGA screens look like. They contain basically the same information as before. There are some new requirements. But as you can see, I clicked on the PGA tab, and this is where you're launching your PGA information for your different programs. First thing you're going to do is click Add. You're going to choose your agency, and in this case, we're doing FDA, your program. All of the programs are listed here depending on what your commodity falls into. You have biologics, cosmetics, medical devices, drugs, food, radiation-emitting products, tobacco, and veterinary medicine. For this demo, I've created a line for biologics under the allergens, and I'll show you what that user interface looks like now. Any mandatory fields are going to be highlighted in yellow. So you would go ahead and fill those in first. For this one here, you can see intended use code is a mandatory field. Clicking the ellipsis brings you the drop-down for the intended use codes that are applicable to this program. You would go ahead and select the one that suits your needs and move on to the next mandatory field. In this case, product code number is mandatory, and for most FDA it is, or all FDA it is. And as a convenience, when you click on that ellipsis next to product code number, it brings up the ORA product code builder. You would go through the product code builder as you used to before, click select and close, and it pops that number, that product code number right into your entry. The next section here is constituent elements. This is your active ingredient information. And for my demo purposes, I have chosen sorbitol. You would click Y for active ingredient, enter the name of your active ingredient, and you can either enter a percentage of the active ingredient or the unit of measure. And you would just click OK. For source processing information, this is where you're going to get your country information, whether it be country of refusal, country of source, country of production, whatever may be applicable to that program, you'll find in this drop-down. And of course, your country would be your normal ISO code for country information. The next block here is trade and brand information. It's not required for this program. Product characteristics is a required field. This is where you would enter your characteristic information for your product. Product entities. In this section, this is where you would go to enter all of the entities that are mandatory for your product and for your program. All mandatories are indicated, as you can see here, with asterisks and a mandatory designation. You would go ahead and enter whatever entity information is needed and click OK. Affirmation of compliance is a required field for some of the programs, and this is where you would go to add those. The ellipsis here shows all of the different affirmation of compliance codes that could be applicable to your commodity. You can go ahead and pick whichever one you need. One thing you'll notice is when you choose an affirmation of compliance code, here in this section in the middle, it's going to show you the different formats that your affirmation of compliance description could be in. In this case, it could be a 4-digit, 5-digit, or 6-digit number. And here's a little key over here to help you out. If there were just numbers or alphanumeric or just alpha, that would be indicated here in this middle section. That's just to guide you to be able to supply the proper information. This is your remarks section. If you wanted to add remarks to your transaction, you can add general remarks, or you could name some contact information if you so choose. Lot value numbers. When you enter here, you see that the highlighted field here is PGA line value, so that is a mandatory field. So you would go ahead and enter the information there for that mandatory field. Packaging is the same as before. You have your different packaging levels here, and you would have to enter whichever packaging carton, outermost, all the way down to innermost, that you wish to send. Your package quantity, your package UOM, and those are listed here. There are also base units indicated as well. Container information, that would go here. For this one, it is not a mandatory field. Should you need to enter container info, this is where it would go. Your arrival is here. Choose the date of your arrival. And that would be it for that one. Now, one thing I wanted to show is that we do have some validations built in to guide you along the way. In this case, FDA Biologics requires the following affirmation of compliance, which is STN. So I would go ahead and put in the STN. Again, here is the model to show you what your number should look like, and it's a 6-digit number. So that validation was able to guide the user on what other compliance codes were needed. And that is it for biologics. I do have some more examples here. This next one here is going to be for cosmetics. Again, you would add your agency. In our case, it is FDA. The program is cosmetics. And if you notice, processing code is grayed out. There is no processing code required for cosmetics. So you would just simply put in the FDA for your agency and COS for the program code. And again, once you go inside, the mandatory fields are highlighted in yellow. All of these are pretty much the same as what we went through for biologics. Okay, now the one that everybody is probably most interested in is going to be food. And your prior notice information, your VTA information. Same thing, agency. You're going to select your program. In this case, we're going to do food, your processing code, whatever that may be. There are different ones here. Wherever your commodity falls is the one that you would choose. For my example here, I have chosen a natural state food. In this example, I have a previously received prior notice number. So I've gone ahead and put my prior notice number in. There are still mandatory data elements that you have to put in even if prior notice has been previously received. So you would go ahead and follow along. Your product code is required. You're going to have some source processing information that's required, and those are your country codes. For this one, brand name I've given. Characteristic description is given. Now, you will notice a difference in product entities for prior notice previously received and when submitting prior notice. The mandatory entities are going to be different between the two. For now, for this example, the mandatory fields, as in the other programs, the mandatory entities are denoted with the mandatory and asterisks, and there are 4 of them. So I've gone ahead and entered all 4. There are no affirmation of compliance is required. I have entered my PGA line value, my packaging, my anticipated date of arrival. And that is what is required for sending an entry that has already received the prior notice. I do have an example here also for when you're entering prior notice information to send for prior notice. Mandatory fields, again, are highlighted in yellow. You're just going to follow along to where the other mandatory fields are designated. In the product entities, you can see here under entity roll codes, it's going to show which ones we have selected. In this case, there are about 6 that are required for submitting prior notice information. As far as the user interface, that's basically it for the different PGA programs. All of the fields that you're going to see in the user interface will be familiar from one program to another. It really is built to guide the user. One thing we ask that you keep in mind is that the validations are a guide. They will not touch every mandatory field. We are building our validations to be as robust as possible. However, in some cases, due to the nature of the FDA requirements, this isn't always possible. The validations are a great way to guide the users to a missed field or a required field, but shouldn't be relied on to satisfy every requirement for FDA reporting. Sometimes there's no clear way to program for some of the requirements. And although I'm not an FDA expert, I can suggest that users be aware of the intended use code requirements, as well as the affirmation of compliance and the entities that are required for the different programs. And these three areas seem to be the most confusing. So keep in mind that the more information you provide electronically to FDA, also the likelier you are to get a faster 1USG message. Okay, bear with me one moment while I pull up another document. Okay, some key points to remember. The go live for PGA reporting is Sunday, February 28th, 2016. Be sure to stay informed. Watch the SMS messages that may convey informational sessions. Sign up for any applicable informational sessions that pertain to your type of business transactions. Contacts. Be sure to know your various contacts and who to go to for software-specific problems and issues, and who to go to for FDA-specific problems and issues. Make sure your key people have this information so they know who to go to for help. Validations. We are building our validations to be as robust as possible. Please use them as a guide only. Do not rely on them to fulfill all required fields. Just to become familiar with your affirmation of compliance codes, intended use codes, and required entities. These seem to be the areas with the most confusion. Just an informational note, information on these areas is available in the FDA Supplemental Guide on the CBP website. I have included a link. The current version as of this presentation is 2.4. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Area 2, Tammy Pintabona.
Thank you, Marcy and Nicole. Great job. While we're compiling the list of questions, and there were quite a few questions that were submitted, which is fantastic, I just wanted to take this time to say that we understand that many of you may be overwhelmed. We know it's a lot of information. This is a learning experience for all of us, and we are learning as well. Support is here to assist in any way possible. We have created manuals for each of the programs within the agency. We are also offering one-on-one training if you feel that will help. Our goal is to create the best possible product. We need to work together to do that. We need your feedback and suggestions. We know that once users get in there and start moving around the PGA screens, there's going to be a list of wishes and wants. We want that list. ACE and PGA is still a work in progress, and CBP has not made it easy. CBP is constantly making changes, which makes things harder on us. You may have asked a question yesterday and received an answer. You may ask that same question tomorrow and you may get a different answer. We are doing the best we can to relay the information to you as quickly and accurately as possible. We have also just hired 2 additional support reps. We want to provide faster and better assistance when users are having an issue, that being phone calls. A lot of the users on this call may have already received calls from a support staff, and we are quickly picking up the phone. We are not going back and forth with email because we know this is a lot of information, so we are doing a lot more phone calls. With that being said, we would like all of our users to go into the support center, make sure that your phone number and your contact information is up to date. We are also prepared to extend the support hours if needed. Right now, where the support staff is here Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We can start that earlier, we can stay later, anything to make it easier on the users. Okay, so I think we have a list of questions now. Let me just go over what I have shown on the screen, just to recap. So we want all of the users to start processing ACRL transactions immediately. Entries with no OGA, entries with NHTSA or NHTSA disclaims, and entries with FDA disclaims. Those are open up to the entire trade. If you have an issue, and this is very important, if you have an issue with an ACRL entry, do not immediately revert back to CRL. Submit that help desk ticket, and we need to find out if it's a software issue or a CBP issue. We need to resolve all of the issues or report issues to CBP as they come up. We do not want to wait until February 29th. Mandatory is February 28th. Now the 28th is a Sunday. That's when CBP is going to be doing their last of the updates. And as of Monday morning, ACS will no longer be allowed for the entries we talked about above. So again, submit all of your suggestions and feedback. This is a work in progress, and we'll work together to get through this. Right now, I'm running statistics on a weekly basis, and I'm taking the last 2 weeks. In SmartBorder, all of the releases that were done in SmartBorders, only 16% were done as ACRL. Now, after these webinars, I'm hoping that every week that number rises. We have to get that number rising fast because February 28th is right around the corner. The good news is 74% of all of the entry summaries have been processed via ACE. And it might interest some of you to know that the very first ACE entry summary transmission that SmartBorder had was back in March of 2013. So we pretty much perfected the ACE entry summary. We're working on the ACRL, and now we have the PGAs. So what I want to do is turn this over to Nicole and Marcy to start going through some of the questions. There you go.
I'll start. I know that we had gotten a specific question, which I do apologize. I actually had forgot to show you guys this during my demonstration of an ACRL. So really quickly, I'm going to, I think Marcy perhaps, yeah. All right, so she's got this open. This is an ACRL again. One of the questions was, when you are doing an ACRL, and it was regarding the entities, right on this screen, again, the mandatory entities are the buyer, the consignee, the manufacturer, and the seller. On the entities portion, you are going to want to select one of each. So right here, I know one of the main focuses was, well, what if I have multiple manufacturers? What we suggest you doing is, since just one of each entity type is required and you shouldn't have double entity types, you would select the manufacturer that applies to the majority of your entry. Because again, what you select here on the header level is going to go ahead and default onto the line. From there, for instance, let's say that Cali Electric was not the manufacturer on line 1, for example, but for the rest of the entry, that was the manufacturer. But line 1, we want to go ahead and correct the right manufacturer. You would go into your line, go up to your line item entity, make sure your manufacturer is highlighted. From here, you can go ahead and hit edit, and that is where you can then select the correct manufacturer that would apply to that specific line. Once again, you do not want to have double entity types. So you don't want to have a manufacturer twice. You don't want to have a consignee and a buyer because those are the same type of entity. So with that being said, choose the majority that will cover your entry for ease on the header level, and then edit anything accordingly to the line level. That's where you'll want to make your specifications. It's going to be on the line level. Another one of the questions that we got is, if you have an ACERL entry, do you still need to submit the docs using the AII module and submitting my AII invoices? So the answer to that is no. If you are doing an ACERL, you can actually go ahead and use the DIS module to submit your paperwork, because everything is now being filed electronically, and you can just go ahead and go into the DIS module and submit that paperwork rather than, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to minimize this. You'll no longer have to use the electronic invoice AII. You won't have to use that. You'll just go into your DIS and submit your paperwork through that module.
Another question that we just received related to that is on the line level for an RLF entry, do you have to submit at each line the AII information? And Nicole will show you exactly what the question is referring to. Right now, in the version that you're using, you have to delete that out. In 1601, which will be coming out very soon, you can fill that in because the system, a lot of users have it set, a lot of filers have it set up where the information auto-populates each line. In 1601, that information can stay there. The system's going to know that it's a transaction type ACRL, and it will ignore it and not send it. So that will allow users to just keep doing what they've been doing, and the system will know whether to send it or not, depending if it's required. Did we go over the PGA?
No. Okay, I do have some questions we received regarding PGA. Do I have to open each section of the PGA screen to see what is mandatory? At this point, yes. We are constantly updating it and adding validations to streamline the process. This is where we will need your feedback and suggestions. We've tried to catch what we can, but obviously any suggestions you have would be welcome. How do I know what FDA program applies? Unfortunately, this isn't something that SmartBorder can help you with, as we don't have all of the information that's required to make that decision. You would need to work with your importers and/or FDA for that information. What do I do if a PGA transmission rejects? You would make your changes, then resubmit the release or the entry summary if you're transmitting the release through entry summary. What do I do if I get an accepted PGA but need to make changes? Any changes to the PGA data after it's been accepted would need to be submitted via DIS.
I can just add a side note to that, Marcy. There is a CBP update in the future that will allow the PGA data to be updated with an indicator in the entry or the release. So that is not live yet, but you may have heard about that update that's going to be coming out. I believe that may have been scheduled for July. That could change depending on CBP's deployment. But there will be in the future a way to update PGA data with an indicator. So.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. Next question. I have an entry with NHTSA and EPA. Can I submit ACRL? Since NHTSA is now live, you would submit your NHTSA data electronically and then submit your EPA data via DIS.
Okay, we have Sandra Kingsley here with a list of more questions.
Can I submit multiple page documentation through DIS, or do I have to add them singly?
CBP requires that each document be submitted separately with that document type indicator. And the reason is for indexing at CBP. They need to be able to type in to search for a document. If you enclose all documents into one PDF, there's no way that they can search within that PDF. So they do require one attachment for each type of document.
If I'm on the FDA Pilot with FDA data, can I submit my entries now?
Yes. Anybody who is on the pilot, who has been accepted to the pilot, can submit. I am the contact with all of the agencies, and I have not received any phone calls stating that any of the SmartBorder users have been accepted into the pilot. So if you are accepted, please let us know. I will have to get in touch with your ABI rep and the agency to get more information.
Are we able to retransmit FDA entry if I'm just updating the data?
Yeah, that goes back to the previous. Right now, no. Any updates to an accepted FDA transmission would need to be sent via DIS, and then you would send that document to, you would indicate FDA as being the recipient of that document. But that will change in the future.
What message type will I get when FDA is requesting data from me?
All requests for documentation will come in the UC. That is the notification message for ACE. So anytime a document is required or requested from whatever, it could be an agency, it could be CBP, it will come in the form of a UC. We have something in SmartBorder today that if a UC message comes in, that requires action. So it's not just a change notifying you of the liquidation date, which every entry gets that. That doesn't require action. But if one of the dispositions in that UC message requires immediate action, you will get an email. That is a setup that is done through SmartBorder. So if you're not getting those UC emails, put in a help desk ticket so we can get that set up properly so you get the proper notification.
Does the USG have to be obtained before merchandise can be picked up, meaning FDA has been released?
Yes, you can submit an entry, get an accepted entry. CBP can release it. If there's any agency on that entry, then you need to wait for the one USG. If you have multiple agencies on an entry, you may get a may proceed. Let's say you have NHTSA, EPA, and FDA on an entry. You may get a may proceed for NHTSA. You may get a may proceed for the EPA. But until you see that one USG message, not all agencies have cleared the shipment for release. Okay, there are some questions that were submitted that look like they're based on the actual broker or a specific entry. Those questions we'll answer separately. Let's see. And can we default line value and ETA? Absolutely we can. At this point, the only thing we've developed that's working right now is manual data entry or data that comes from the product. Okay, so right now you can store all of the information that's needed at the product level. When you select that product, the data will populate. In the future, because we are constantly updating line value and estimated time of arrival, will default from the entry. It's just not live yet. Import the product codes into PGA codes. I'm going to assume that's referring to taking the OGA data that exists at the product today that's stored and auto-creating the PGA. Take, for example, a disclaim. Maybe you have products today where the FDA disclaim is marked in the OGA section. Yes, I have a way of running a script that'll take all of those products and automatically create the PGA disclaim. Same as if you have NHTSA. Maybe you have products that have DOT information. You have DOT information, and you want to take that DOT information and automatically create NHTSA records. We have a way of doing that too. It's a one-time, we take all the data. Now, the issue with that, and it becomes a bigger issue when we get to the FDA, the PGAs require more information for each of the agencies, meaning LACI, DOT, and FDA. Those are the OGAs that exist today. The PGA data sets require more information. So what we can do is populate the information that exists in OGA into PGA, but there will be some missing data. So there will be a requirement where you're going to have to go in and actually add and clean up the data a little bit.
Which, with Tammy saying that real quick, I do just want to show everybody, kind of leading into what she was discussing. If you're in a client profile and you've gone ahead and put in the request to us, like Tammy said, to move information over, you'll notice here I just picked up a test profile. I'm going to click on product list, wait for this to come up. So here's one that has FDA information. I'm going to go ahead and open up that product. And then you've added your tariff, let's say. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. So if this had disclaim FDA information, that's something that would be able to be pulled over into your PGA information. And I wanted to make mention to go ahead and show you this new button that is now added in your product library. If you click here to add or edit ACE PGA information, you'll notice that that familiar screen that Marcy went over and I went over, it'll pop up here. And this, again, after you were to put the request in, your FDA information could then be disclaimed. If you have any products as of right now that you want to go ahead and add the PGA information in manually, you know, possibly you guys are a smaller company and you just have one or two that need to be added manually, you can, again, come into your product list from the client profile and add them by hitting that button and going forward from there. So I just wanted to show everybody how to get there. I'll go through it again really quick. So we're in a product list, and I've selected a product, and right where the tariff number applies, if you hit add or edit, that's where you're going to find your PGA button. I know that has been some tickets have been sent in saying, I don't know how to add my PGA to keep it, and this is where you can find that.
Okay, another question that just came in is container. Does that mean the ocean container? It's the container section, so you could have maybe an air shipment that had a container. Anytime something isn't in a container, rails would have container numbers. Anytime that you see a container section, it is always conditional, meaning it's conditional based on if you have container numbers. The electronic invoice checkmark. Right now, you can, again, it goes to the same as the AII information at the line level. That checkbox, if you check it, you're no longer going to have to uncheck it. The system, again, will know if it's an ACE cargo release, it won't send that indicator, or it will send the indicator if it's needed. The system has been really good about knowing for RLF what's required on a CRL versus what's required on an ACRL and vice versa, what's not required. So the transmission will take care of that all on its own. Status on the FDA pilots. Do filers need to sign up? Yes. Right now, I believe the FDA pilots, they're asking for importers and not so much brokers. So if you have a client, an importer that's doing a lot of FDA, I would definitely contact your ABI rep to find out what information they need. Let's see. Multiple M IDs. Again, as Nicole went over in her presentation, if you have an entry with multiple manufacturers, each line, you can only have one, well, at the header level and the line level, CBP only requires one of each type. So if you have multiple, at the header level, you could put one of them, and then at each of the line levels, you would put the different MIDs. Now, when you add, the system will always take the header level manufacturer to default, but you can change that. So what we recommend is if you have 10 lines and 5 of the manufacturers are the same, that would be your header. So this way, 5 of the lines will default, and then you would have to change the other 5. Are you saying instead of entering in PGA, you just submit the docs on DIS? Yes. This doesn't apply until February 28th. So February 28th, everything will have to be sent ACE cargo release. So if you have an entry, let's say you have an entry with USDA, you would submit those docs DIS, because the only PGAs that are going mandatory on February 28th are FDA, LACI, and I'm missing one, FDA and NHTSA. So those are the only three that are mandatory. FCC we can talk about in a second. I don't know if we touched base enough on FCC. So those are the only three. And what they've done, they use those three because those are the three existing OGAs. Any of the new PGAs, if you have an entry, you submit those docs CIS. Now, as far as FCC goes, FCC you would send today. You can do ACECRL release for FCC. The only difference being is your FCC data stays in the OGA section. And since FCC is an entry summary requirement, when you send your ACE entry summary, the FCC data will be sent. FCC is not moving over into ACE. That's because as of July, there will be no more FCC electronic transmissions. That's going away. So for right now, up until from today going forward to July, your FCC entries must be sent ACRL, and you make sure that the FCC data exists in the OGA tab. Do you have, let's see.
I have one where somebody wanted to ask about the SO message, how in my example here, it has received the release, it's gotten the 1 USG, but in my SO, you'll notice at the bottom the release date hasn't been populated yet, and they wanted to know the difference for when you can tell it's actually been released. You should be receiving, as you'll see in this example, there's multiple SO messages. There was one right below the one that I have highlighted to show the body of this particular SO, and here's an SO message. So you should be receiving an SO message when you get your release date, and that then would then populate and fill in there. So you'll want to just continue to make sure that you are, watching for any applicable messages. As Tammy advised, you might have done this entry, let's say, had FDA and APHIS, and maybe you got the may proceed on the FDA. Then you get an SO that showed that you finally got your 1 USG. Then you got an SO showing that your release date has been updated. So you'll want to continue to monitor your SO messages just like your RR messages.
Another question that came in is, will the manufacturer import in from ISF? At this point, no. That is an update that we will be doing in the very near future. 95% of our entries require USDA LACI. Do you recommend that we start filing ACRL? At this time, no. LACI has not opened up to all filers yet. LACI is still restricted to the, I believe it's the 8 importers who are on the pilot. So at this point, hold off until they open it up. I'm hoping that within the next 2 weeks, I'm hoping they don't wait until February 28th to open it up. So I would just keep looking at your CSMS messages, similar to what happened with NHTSA. CSMS message came out stating that NHTSA opened it up. I'm hoping that we'll get that within the next couple of weeks about LACI. Okay.
Has ACRL been turned on yet for RLF brokers? So if you are, I think that you're asking, can you file an ACRL if you're doing RLF? And that is open. You can go ahead and file RLF entries via the ACRL transaction type.
Another question we have is, somebody's asking about the food, the BTA manual for FDA. Marcy, we should be able to get that out. We'll send a copy to each of the email addresses that's on today's webinar. We're just finalizing some things. We're waiting for information from FDA. Marcy worked hand in hand with FDA on all of the requirements. There were some issues that Marcy had found in her testing, went back to FDA, and it was an agency issue. So she's waiting for some changes to happen there. Are MIDs still required? When we say the MID, we're actually talking about the manufacturer. And in ACE, you send the manufacturer name and address. So, and you'll notice users who went from the version of 1506 to 1507 in the line items in 1506 and previous to that, we used to have two fields for a tax ID and an M ID. Well, in version 1507, we got rid of that. It's now a grid. We have to refer to entities as entities now, not so much a tax ID or an M ID, because there are times that customs will require the full name and address. So we've opened up at the line level, we created that grid so that you now have to use trans parties. Trans parties store the name and address, so you're not just able to go into a field and manually type in an MID or a tax ID. Using your trans parties will send the appropriate information in the actual transmission to customs. Somebody is asking about an example of a disclaim of NHTSA. For NHTSA, there are multiple programs. Can you go back into the entry, Nicole?
Sure.
And I'll show you here on the screen. Only one of the programs within the NHTSA agency allows a disclaim. So if I were to come into here, create a new line, and let's say I had NHTSA information here, and I would go to my PGA, I'd type in my commercial invoice up here, and then I would add, go to the agency of NHTSA, and then it has multiple program codes. Okay, the only program code are your off-road vehicles. So once you hit off-road vehicles, then you get the option of a disclaimer. The disclaimer will only pop up if your agency and program code allow for a disclaimer. So let's say I'm doing regulated motor vehicle equipment and I hit select, you'll see that the disclaim goes away. The system knows when and when not the disclaimer is allowed, when it is and when it is not. So for NHTSA, the only program within NHTSA are your off-road vehicles. And again, similar to FDA, you would get the pick list. Now, different from FDA, for FDA, you have two options, A and B. For an off-road vehicle, for the disclaimer, it's always going to be an A. It's not regulated. Okay? Oh, let's see what else we have. Since ACS won't be allowed after 228, how will we do type 3 entries? It's type 3, meaning 03, your quota, can be done today. The ones that cannot be done are the entry types that start with a 3, and I believe those are your warehouse withdrawals. So let's just go up to entry type. So it is, oh, it's not listed here. Hold on. Because the system only gives you the entry types that are allowed for ACRL. So hold on one second here.
Here, I'll show you my 0. We can go back to that one if you want to look at it.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to make this CRL and just go into entry here. Oh, one other indicator I wanted to show. So if I go into the entry type, so it's the 30, 31, 32, and 34, which are the warehouse withdrawals. Right now, those cannot be done ACECRL release. So if you have any of those, that's when you would use ACS. Got a couple more? Mm-hmm. The one USG replaced the FDA may proceed? No. You will still get a may proceed. And does your example show that, Nicole?
No.
Okay.
Well, it just shows the release.
You will get a may proceed, but that doesn't mean anything in the ACE environment. You want to make sure you get the one USG because you may have multiple agencies. So just getting a may proceed on one agency doesn't necessarily mean that it's cleared by all. If I do an RLF via ACRL, I must submit docs via DIS even if there is no USC requesting it, a UC requesting it. No, you would wait until the UC requests the documents. The UC, again, being the CBP, the notification for the entry. So you would only send it if you get the UC message stating that the electronic invoice is required. And again, I'm not sure, I don't believe that CBP has changed the wording on that. So it may still say electronic invoice required, that it's as long as you're doing it as ACE, that means DIS. Let's see. What other questions? Okay, while we're waiting for some more questions to be compiled, what I wanted to do is bring up some information here. Right now here, I know Marcy had touched base on this, the FDA webinars that are coming up. We highly recommend registering for these. This will give you specific information to FDA. What we did today was give you the information on the system and where to enter the data and how the data is compiled. There is an ACE trade daily call. It's not happening today because of the holiday, but I highly recommend joining this call. Right now there's about there's a little over 100 people that call every day. It's been an ongoing call. It started out as monthly, then went to bi-weekly and then weekly, but as of November, it's now a daily call. It gives you a lot of good information as far as any issues that they're having today or any future changes that are coming. So, and it's open up to the trade. You have importers, you have brokers, you have users, and you have actual software vendors on this call. There's also the PGA implementation guide. I don't expect anybody to go in and take a look at this as far as the record layout, but the beginning of each PGA guide gives you some really good information regarding that specific agency and the requirements that are required for that agency. So again, it's not, I don't expect anybody to look at it and say, oh my gosh, you know, I need to learn the CATER. You don't. It's just actually the beginning of each of the guides. And again, here is the email address for submitting tickets. One of the things that we came across, because we now have filers who are filing NHTSA and the DOT or the NHTSA disclaim and FDA disclaims, the error messages that are coming back are very vague and they're very technical. We had a user who submitted a ticket and her reject was the PG07 is missing. Well, the PG07 is a technical term. It's something that's in the transmission. So what I've done on my second page here is sort of giving you an overview, a high-level view. So if the error message says PG07, you'd go to this list and say, oh, that's the SmartBorder trade name section. Or if you get, you know, something about an error in the PG24, if the reject message from CBP or FDA or whatever the agency is not clear, you can come to here that will help guide you. So if you have a, you know, PG26 you're missing, you come to here and you know, okay, I'm missing something in the packaging section. On that daily call, it was brought up by the trade that they're not user-friendly. The error messages are not user-friendly at all. CBP agreed. They will work on changing it, but in the meantime, until that happens, I've given you this guide that will hopefully, you know, steer you in the right direction. Okay, so I think we've answered the questions that we can for right now. What we will be doing today is compiling every one of the questions along with the answers that we've given you, and then some of the questions regarding the actual, like an entry question or a port question regarding a specific filer. We will get to those as well. We'll contact you on that. Any questions that you have, or if you want the copying of the OGA data over into PGAs, please submit a ticket for that. Again, please start processing ACRL immediately. February 28th is right around the corner. I will be posting out the weekly percentages so that everybody can see, hopefully as a group, we can see that those percentages are rising rapidly per week. If they're not, then we have some issues. We don't want everybody waiting until February 29th, because then I can tell you that the help desk already is getting inundated right now, this early, with a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we get everything answered so that on February 29th, everybody can just file and there'll be a seamless process for everyone. And again, we need your feedback, so please submit tickets regarding feedback. If you would, you could even create one ticket with with a listing. You don't have to create a different ticket for each option or each want that you want, each enhancement you're looking for. With that being said, I think we're all set. I do have one more poll I'd like to put out just to get an idea if the webinar helped you. So let me just do that. Sorry.
You click on it down.
There we go.
Yeah.
I just want to find out that if you found the webinar helpful, it's just a simple yes or no. At this point, you know, the webinar has ended. It doesn't mean that our assistance has ended. We're here for you.
I also just wanted to say, too, if anybody, like we mentioned right off the jump, if you haven't done an ACRL transaction type yet, and maybe that's because you haven't received the one-on-one training that you are available to receive from the support team, please go ahead and put in that ticket now to us, because we would love to schedule for those who have not received that ACRL training yet. We can go over all of the ins and outs beyond the PGA portion that we covered today. If you have any questions, the DIS, that kind of stuff, the entry specifics on the lines and things of that nature. So if you haven't gotten your ACRL training, please also submit a ticket and let us know so we can get that scheduled with you.
Okay, it looks like 96% of you said that the webinar was helpful, and we appreciate that. Thank you. There is 4%, which I think results to about 2 users. If you are one of those users who responded no, please put in a help desk ticket so that we can give you a call. We don't want anybody leaving here thinking, well, I can't do this because I don't have the information, or I'm looking for something else. Please let us know. Put in a ticket so that we can call you. We can talk through this. Anybody who has called us or put in a ticket saying that they were confused, a 10-minute phone call can fix that, I promise you. So please put in tickets if you are one of those users. With that being said, the webinar has been recorded, so we will send you a link as soon as we compile that. So please look later in the day for emails from us with all of the information regarding today's webinar. And we all thank you very much for attending. And I know that we will be speaking again very soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.